Raymond Foster pushed open the door, toolbox in hand, expecting marble counters and a dripping faucet. Instead, he found his boss on the floor. Norah Ashford, the CEO who never smiled, who ended careers with one glance, who terrified entire boardrooms, sat crumpled in silk pajamas, arms locked around her knees, shoulders shaking in the half-light. A single candle burned on a birthday cake, meant for no one. Behind her, a photograph clung to the wall, a little girl with dark curls and a smile that looked hauntingly familiar. Nora's head jerked up. Mascara streaked down her porcelain face like war paint dissolving in defeat. Their eyes locked. His toolbox hit the floor, metal clanging against tile, shattering the sacred silence. She didn't scream, didn't order him out. Her voice came out broken, barely above a whisper, and the words sliced through him like glass. "Please forget what you saw here." But Raymond couldn't forget. Not the rawness in her eyes, not the child's worn bracelet peeking from beneath her sleeve, and certainly not the truth that this moment would crack open, that the most powerful woman he'd ever known was carrying a grief so heavy it had been slowly killing her in silence. Raymond had been working at Ashford Technologies for 3 years, fixing broken things in a building full of people who barely noticed he existed. He wore the same navy blue uniform every day, carried the same dented toolbox his father had given him before he died, and moved through the gleaming corridors like a ghost. Most employees didn't bother learning his name. To them, he was just the maintenance guy, the one who showed up when something stopped working and disappeared the moment it was fixed. That invisibility suited him fine. After his wife Lauren passed 4 years ago, he'd learned to find comfort in being overlooked. It meant fewer questions about the dark circles under his eyes, or why his daughter's lunchbox was always packed with mismatched snacks. It meant he could focus on what mattered, keeping his head down, earning a paycheck, and making sure his 6-year-old daughter Chloe never doubted that she was loved. The emergency call had come through at 11:15 that night, while he was helping Chloe with her bedtime routine. She'd been upset because she couldn't draw a perfect rainbow for her art project, and he'd spent 20 minutes sitting beside her, guiding her small hand with his calloused one, showing her how imperfections could be beautiful too. His phone buzzed just as she finally smiled. The building manager's voice was tense. Water damage in the penthouse, urgent repair needed. CEO personally requested the best technician. Raymond had kissed Chloe's forehead, promised Mrs. Chen next door would check on her every 30 minutes, and driven through empty streets wondering what kind of emergency couldn't wait until morning. He'd worked on Norah Ashford's floor before, replacing light fixtures, unclogging drains, but he'd never been to her private residence. The woman was a legend in the building, 31 years old and already running a tech empire, featured in magazines with headlines about her ruthless business strategies and her refusal to discuss anything personal. People whispered that she was brilliant but cold, that she'd turned down acquisition offers worth billions because she wouldn't compromise her vision. The penthouse elevator required a special key card. The building manager had given it to him with strict instructions. Fix the problem. Don't touch anything else, and absolutely do not disturb Ms. Ashford. The doors opened to reveal a space that looked more like a museum than a home. White walls, minimalist furniture, everything arranged with mathematical precision. There were no photographs on display, no clutter, no signs that an actual human being lived there. The silence pressed against his eardrums. He'd found the kitchen easily enough, following the sound of dripping water. And that's when he'd pushed open the wrong door. The second door. Not the maintenance closet, the one that led to Norah Ashford's private sanctuary. The one that revealed the woman behind the armor was breaking apart in ways nobody was supposed to see. Now, standing frozen in the doorway with his toolbox scattered at his feet, Raymond watched as Norah Ashford transformed. The vulnerability vanished like smoke. She rose to her feet with the mechanical precision of someone who'd practiced hiding pain until it became muscle memory. Her hands moved to smooth her hair, to wipe her face, to rebuild the fortress. But her fingers trembled. The birthday cake sat between them like evidence of something forbidden, chocolate frosting. A single candle burned down to a nub, and piped letters that read, "Happy Birthday, Olivia," in pink icing. The photograph on the wall showed the same little girl, maybe 4 years old, laughing in a park with her arms wrapped around a younger version of Norah. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark curls, same delicate features, same eyes that seemed to hold entire universes. Raymond's throat tightened. He knew that look in Norah's eyes because he'd seen it in his own mirror every morning for 4 years. It was the look of someone who'd lost the person they loved most and had no idea how to keep living anyway. "I'm sorry," he managed to say, his voice rough. "The building manager said the kitchen. I thought—" Norah held up one hand, cutting him off. Her face had gone blank. All traces of emotion locked away behind a mask so perfect it could have been carved from ice. "The leak is in the other room," she said, her CEO voice back in place, cold and commanding. "Through that door. Fix it and leave." She turned away from him, her spine rigid, and began gathering up the birthday cake with hands that still shook despite her best efforts. Raymond wanted to say something, anything to acknowledge what he'd witnessed, but the words stuck in his chest. He'd learned enough about grief to know that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was pretend you hadn't seen someone shatter. So he picked up his tools, walked to the correct door, and spent the next hour replacing a corroded pipe beneath the sink, while the image of Norah Ashford crying alone on her kitchen floor burned itself into his memory. When he finished, she was gone. The cake was gone. The photograph remained, but it had been turned to face the wall, as if even that small connection to the past was too much to bear. He left a handwritten note on the counter with his work order number and drove home through streets that felt emptier than before. Chloe was asleep when he checked on her, curled up with the stuffed rabbit Lauren had made during her last months. Raymond stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her breathe, and thought about the woman in the penthouse who'd once had a daughter too. He thought about the worn bracelet on Norah's wrist, sized for a child's hand. He thought about how grief didn't care if you were powerful or poor, famous or forgotten. It found you anyway, and it stayed as long as it wanted. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, and wondering if Norah Ashford was doing the same thing 20 floors above the city. Alone with her ghosts and her birthday cake, meant for a little girl who would never grow old. The next morning, Raymond expected nothing to change. He showed up to work at 7, checked the maintenance schedule, and started his rounds. But when he walked past the executive floor, he felt it, a shift in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Norah Ashford emerged from her office, and for a fraction of a second, their eyes met across the glass-walled corridor. She looked away first, her expression unreadable, but Raymond saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand moved unconsciously to touch the bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't slow her stride, but that moment of eye contact felt like a hook lodged in his chest, pulling tight every time he thought about looking away. Something had shifted between them, something neither of them knew how to name yet. He spent the rest of the week trying to avoid her, taking the service stairs instead of the main elevators, timing his work orders to stay clear of the executive floor. It didn't matter. The universe, or fate, or whatever cosmic force enjoyed making people uncomfortable, kept throwing them together in small, impossible ways. 3 days after the incident, Raymond was repairing a jammed printer on the 3rd floor when Chloe's daycare called. His daughter had fallen on the playground. Nothing serious, but she was scared and crying and asking for him. He explained the situation to his supervisor, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the exit. The elevator was empty when he stepped inside, but it stopped on the executive floor. The doors opened. Norah Ashford stood there, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit, tablet in hand, every inch the untouchable CEO. She glanced at him, then at the elevator panel, and for a moment he thought she'd wait for the next one. Instead, she stepped inside. The doors closed. They stood in silence as the elevator descended, the numbers ticking down with agonizing slowness. Raymond could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle, like winter air and crushed pine needles. His phone buzzed with another text from the daycare. Chloe's teacher had sent a photo. His daughter sitting on a bench, knees scraped, tears streaking her face, holding the rainbow drawing she'd finished. His heart clenched. "Is everything all right?" Norah's voice startled him. He looked up to find her watching him, and for the first time since that night, her expression wasn't carefully blank. There was something softer there, almost concerned, though she seemed surprised by her own question. "My daughter," Raymond said, holding up the phone so she could see the picture. "She fell. Nothing serious, but she's upset." Nora's entire body went still. She stared at the photo of Chloe with an intensity that made Raymond uncomfortable, like she was memorizing every detail, the curls escaping from a messy ponytail, the gap-toothed smile trying to be brave. The rainbow clutched like a lifeline. Her hand moved to her bracelet again, twisting it once, twice. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone quiet. "How old is she?" Raymond hesitated, sensing he was stepping into territory he didn't understand. 6. Just turned 6 in September. Something flickered across Nora's face, there and gone so fast he almost missed it. Pain, raw and immediate, like someone had pressed on a wound that never healed. The elevator dinged, announcing the lobby. Norah blinked and the mask slid back into place. "I hope she feels better soon," she said, and walked away without another word, leaving Raymond standing in the elevator with the unsettling feeling that he'd just witnessed something important, though he couldn't explain what. Over the next 2 weeks, he started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. Norah arrived at the office before everyone else and left long after the building had emptied. She never ate lunch in the cafeteria, never joined the other executives for their Friday happy hours, never seemed to have anyone waiting for her. When she finally walked to her car, she existed in a bubble of perfect isolation, untouchable and alone. But Raymond also noticed the small cracks in her armor, the way her face softened when she passed the company's small daycare center where a few employees' children played during after-school hours. The way she paused near the window overlooking the playground, watching the kids chase each other, her hand always finding that bracelet. Once, he saw her kneel down to help a little boy who dropped his toy cars across the hallway, gathering them up with a gentleness that didn't match her reputation. The boy had thanked her and run off, and Norah had remained crouched there for a long moment, staring at her empty hands like she'd forgotten what they were for. Chloe started asking about his work more often. She'd always been curious, but lately her questions had a sharper focus. "Who do you work for? What's she like? Is she nice?" Raymond tried to explain that he didn't really work for Norah Ashford directly, that he barely knew her. But Chloe had seen the photo on the company website during a school project about parents' jobs. She declared that Ms. Ashford looked sad but pretty, and decided, with the certainty only 6-year-olds possess, that someone should make her smile. Raymond had laughed it off at the time, but now the comment haunted him. His daughter, who'd never met Norah, had seen something in a corporate headshot that hundreds of employees missed every day. Maybe children were better at recognizing their own kind, other people carrying invisible wounds, other hearts learning to beat around the holes left by loss. The second turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after that night in the penthouse. Raymond was replacing burnt-out bulbs in the parking garage when he heard raised voices echoing off the concrete. He recognized Norah's voice immediately, sharp and commanding, and a man's voice responding with equal force. "You can't keep living like this, Norah. It's been 5 years, 5 years of watching you destroy yourself." Raymond knew he should leave, should give them privacy. But something in the man's tone, not quite cruel but not kind either, made him hesitate. He moved closer to the stairwell, staying out of sight. "I'm not destroying myself," Norah said, her voice tight. "I'm running a successful company. I'm doing exactly what I should be doing." The man laughed, bitter and sharp. "You're hiding. There's a difference. When was the last time you let yourself feel anything? When was the last time you even said her name out loud?" Silence. Then Norah's voice, so quiet, Raymond almost missed it. "Don't. Please don't." The man sighed. I loved her too, you know. She was my niece. But Olivia wouldn't want this for you. She wouldn't want you to stop. Stop! The word cracked like a whip. You don't get to tell me what she would have wanted. You don't get to stand there and pretend you understand what it's like to. Her voice broke. Raymond heard footsteps, rapid and uneven, like someone running. The man called after her, but she didn't stop. Raymond pressed himself against the wall as Norah rushed past, her face buried in her hands, moving blindly toward the exit. The man followed a moment later, late 50s, expensive suit, the same dark hair as Norah threaded with gray. He looked exhausted and sad. And when he passed Raymond's hiding spot, he shook his head and muttered something that sounded like stubborn, just like her father. Raymond waited until they were both gone before emerging. His hands were shaking. He'd pieced together enough now to understand the shape of Norah's grief, even if he didn't know all the details. A daughter named Olivia, gone for 5 years. A family that tried to help but didn't know how. And a woman who'd built walls so high and thick that she was suffocating inside them, alone in a prison of her own making. That night, he told Chloe a story. Not a fairy tale, but something closer to the truth, about a queen who lived in a tall tower and forgot how to smile. Chloe listened with her serious face on, the one she wore when she was thinking hard about something important. When he finished, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Why doesn't anyone help her, Daddy? Raymond tucked the blanket around her shoulders, searching for an answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Sometimes people don't know how to ask for help, or they think they don't deserve it. Chloe frowned, considering this. Then she scrambled out of bed, grabbed her crayons and construction paper, and started drawing with the focused intensity she brought to all her art projects. She worked for 20 minutes while Raymond watched, bemused, until she held up her creation. A rainbow, bright and cheerful, with "You are not alone" written in her careful first-grade handwriting at the bottom. She'd drawn 2 stick figures holding hands beneath the rainbow, one tall with dark hair, one small with curls. "Can you give this to the sad queen?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide and earnest. "Maybe it will help." Raymond's throat tightened. He thought about explaining why that might not be appropriate, why Norah Ashford probably wouldn't appreciate a child's drawing, why it was better to leave well enough alone. But then he thought about the birthday cake with Olivia's name. The photograph turned to face the wall, the woman crying alone in her empty penthouse. He thought about how Lauren used to say that small kindnesses could save lives, even when you couldn't see the impact right away. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, taking the drawing. "I'll make sure she gets it." The next morning, before his shift started, Raymond rode the elevator to the executive floor with Chloe's rainbow tucked inside a manila envelope. The administrative assistant, a brisk woman named Patricia, who usually treated him like furniture, gave him a suspicious look when he approached her desk. "I need to deliver something to Ms. Ashford," he said, keeping his voice professional. "It's personal." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Ms. Ashford doesn't accept personal deliveries." Raymond met her gaze steadily. "She'll want this one. Trust me." Something in his expression must have convinced her, because after a long moment, she took the envelope and nodded. "I'll see that she gets it." He tried not to think about it for the rest of the day, focusing instead on his work orders and staying busy enough that his mind couldn't wander. But at 4:30 that afternoon, his supervisor called him into the office with an odd expression. "You've been requested," he said, sliding a work order across the desk. "Penthouse. Ms. Ashford specifically asked for you." Raymond's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He took the work order, noted the vague description, "minor repair needed," and headed for the elevator with the feeling of walking toward something inevitable. The penthouse was different in daylight. Sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the white walls glow, transforming the space from a mausoleum into something almost welcoming. Norah stood at the window overlooking the city, still wearing her work clothes, but with her jacket draped over a chair, her shoulders less rigid than usual. She didn't turn when he entered. "There's nothing broken," she said quietly. Raymond stopped in the middle of the room, toolbox in hand, waiting. After a long moment, Norah turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and she was holding Chloe's rainbow drawing like it was made of glass. "Your daughter drew this." It wasn't a question, but Raymond nodded anyway. "She wanted you to have it. She thought you looked sad." Norah's fingers traced the stick figures at the bottom of the page, the two hands joined together in crayon solidarity. "Children see things adults miss," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They haven't learned to look away yet." She moved to the kitchen, to the same counter where Raymond had left his work order 3 weeks ago, and set the drawing down carefully. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a photograph from her pocket, worn soft at the edges from being carried everywhere. "This is Olivia," she said, holding it out. Raymond approached slowly and took the photo. The little girl was beautiful. 4 years old, maybe 5, with Nora's dark curls and a smile that lit up the whole world. She was wearing a yellow dress and holding a rainbow pinwheel. "She loved rainbows," Norah continued. "Every time it rained, she'd run to the window and wait for one to appear. She believed they were magic bridges that connected sad people to happy ones." Raymond handed the photo back carefully, understanding now why Chloe's drawing had broken through. "What happened?" he asked. Norah sank into a kitchen chair. "Car accident, 5 years ago. I was driving. We were going to her ballet recital. A truck ran a red light. I walked away with bruises. She didn't walk away at all." Raymond pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "My husband, ex-husband, blamed me," she continued, "said I was distracted. Maybe he was right. The divorce was final 6 months after we buried her. He moved to Boston, started a new family. I just stayed here, kept working, kept pretending." Raymond thought about the last 4 years. "After my wife died, I thought the pain would kill me. For a long time, I just went through the motions. I was so focused on surviving that I forgot how to live." "Does it get easier?" Norah asked. Raymond told her the truth. "No, but it gets different. The grief doesn't shrink. You just grow around it." They sat in silence, two people who'd loved and lost. "I haven't said her name out loud in 3 years," Norah said softly. "My brother keeps trying to get me to talk about her, but it feels like if I stop hurting, it means she didn't matter." "Chloe asks about her mom sometimes," Raymond said. "I've learned that talking about the happy memories doesn't mean forgetting the sad ones." Norah wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to do that. Be normal again. Let people in." "Then maybe it's time to start haunting differently," Raymond said. "Not alone, not in silence." Before either could say more, his phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. Chloe needed him. He stood. "I should go." "Wait." Norah looked uncertain. Could you bring her here sometime? Your daughter. I'd like to thank her for the drawing." Raymond studied her face. All he saw was a lonely woman reaching out for connection. "She'd like that," he said. "Saturday afternoon?" Norah suggested. "I could order pizza." "Saturday works?" Saturday arrived. Chloe insisted on wearing her favorite purple dress and clutched a new drawing, 3 stick figures under an even bigger rainbow. When Norah opened the door in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, she looked nervous. "Hi," Chloe said immediately. "I'm Chloe and I'm 6 and I drew you another rainbow and that's a really pretty bracelet. And are you a queen?" Norah laughed, transforming her face. "I'm not a queen, but thank you. I love your dress." Chloe beamed and held out her drawing. "See? There's you and me and Daddy under the rainbow so the sad feelings can wash away." Norah took it with careful hands, her eyes bright with tears. "It's perfect. Would you like to help me hang it on my refrigerator?" By the time pizza arrived, they were friends. Chloe chattering away, Norah laughing, Raymond watching something beautiful unfold. Then Chloe asked, "Do you have any kids?" Norah set down her pizza. "I did. I had a daughter named Olivia. She would have been 9 now. Did she go to heaven with my mommy?" "Yes, I think she did." Chloe nodded. "That's good. Mommy needs friends." She paused. "Do you get lonely?" Norah glanced at Raymond. "Yes, I get very lonely." Chloe climbed into Norah's lap and wrapped her arms around her neck. "You don't have to be lonely anymore. Me and Daddy are good at keeping people company." Nora's face crumpled. She held Chloe tight, tears falling. Raymond's throat tightened. "We're pretty good at that." They stayed for hours. Later on the couch, Norah said quietly, "Thank you. For this." "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued, "about growing around grief. I want to try. I want to stop punishing myself." "So start small," Raymond said. "Start with pizza on Saturdays and rainbow drawings." Chloe looked up. "Oh, you should come to the park with us tomorrow. We feed the ducks." Norah looked at Raymond, asking permission. He nodded. "I'd love to," she said. That Sunday, and many after, became routine. Norah showed up at the park in casual clothes. They walked while Chloe raced ahead. They talked about everything: work, weather, movies, but also about grief, about loss, about slowly learning to live again. At work, things changed. Norah was still brilliant, still demanding, but softer. She remembered names, asked about families, smiled in meetings. Months passed, winter came. Norah spent Christmas with them, bringing thoughtful gifts, an art set for Chloe, a vintage toolbox for Raymond. Chloe made her a card. "Thank you for being my friend." Raymond gave her a framed photo of the three of them, all smiling. On Christmas Eve, after Chloe slept, they sat together. "I put Olivia's picture back up," Norah said, "not hidden. I want to remember her in the light." Raymond kissed her temple. She'd come so far. Spring came. Norah scaled back work hours, started therapy, worked through her guilt. Raymond watched her bloom, colorful, vibrant, present. Chloe thrived with both of them, talking about Lauren openly, listening to Nora's stories about Olivia. By summer, they'd fallen into rhythm. Raymond had a drawer at her place. She had a key to his. Chloe called her Norah now. Sometimes, when tired or happy, something that sounded like Mom. They never corrected her. One Saturday morning, 7 months after that first pizza, Raymond woke in Nora's bed to find her watching him. "I was thinking about the first time you saw me in the kitchen," she said, "how mortified I was. And now I'm grateful. You saved my life. You and Chloe with her rainbow drawings." "We saved each other," Raymond corrected. Chloe's voice echoed through the apartment. They laughed, got up, found her setting the table. This was their life, imperfect, beautiful, built on loss but growing toward light. Later at the park, Norah took his hand. "I've been thinking about the future. I want this, all of this. I want to stop being afraid." Before he could answer, Chloe ran over. "There's a rainbow!" They looked up. A perfect arc stretched across the sky after a brief shower. Chloe grabbed their hands, pulling them toward it. "See? I told you rainbows were magic. They connect sad people to happy ones." Raymond and Norah exchanged a look over her head. Norah squeezed his hand, eyes bright. "Yes," she said, "yes to everything." Standing there with his daughter between them and a rainbow overhead, Raymond felt complete. Not healed. Grief didn't work that way. But whole. In a different way. Like broken pieces carefully reassembled into something new and beautiful. If this story about Raymond, Norah, and Chloe touched something deep inside you, you're not alone. Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when we're at our lowest, when we think no one sees us, when we believe we have to carry everything alone. Raymond wasn't supposed to open that door. He was just there to fix a leak. But he walked into something far more broken than a pipe. A woman who'd locked herself away from the world, convinced that if she just worked hard enough, achieved enough, built an empire big enough, it would somehow fill the hole left by losing her daughter. But grief doesn't work that way. It doesn't care about corner offices or 7-figure salaries. It doesn't respect walls we build or masks we wear. It finds us anyway. And when we try to face it alone, it becomes a prison. Norah Ashford had everything the world told her to want: power, success, respect, control. But she didn't have what she needed most: permission to be human, permission to break, permission to admit that the most successful person in the building was drowning in silence. And then a maintenance man saw her. Really saw her. Not the CEO, not the untouchable ice queen, just a grieving mother who'd forgotten she was allowed to heal. But here's what makes this story so powerful. Raymond didn't save Norah, and Norah didn't save Raymond. They showed up for each other. Raymond showed up with a 6-year-old daughter who drew rainbows and believed sad people could become happy ones. Norah showed up by choosing, day after day, pizza after pizza, park visit after park visit, to let them in. That's what healing looks like. Not a single dramatic moment, not one conversation that fixes everything, but small choices repeated over time. Saying a name out loud, putting a photograph back up, accepting an invitation to feed ducks on Sunday. This story is about what happens when we stop trying to be strong enough to survive alone and start being brave enough to ask for help. When we realize that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, that loving again doesn't betray the people we've lost, that grief and joy can coexist in the same heart, the same day, the same breath. Chloe understood something most adults forget. Broken people don't need fixing, they need witnessing. They need someone to say, "I see you hurting, and I'm not leaving." She drew rainbows because she believed in magic bridges. And she was right. The magic wasn't in the rainbow. It was in the connection, in the willingness to reach across an aisle, across a kitchen counter, across the enormous distance between two people who've lost everything and are terrified to risk loving again. So if you're carrying grief right now, whether it's been 5 years or 5 days, know this: you don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to be strong every moment. You don't have to pretend you're fine when you're breaking. And if you see someone else breaking, if you glimpse behind their armor and see the wound they're hiding, don't look away. Don't assume they want to be alone. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up. Bring pizza, draw a rainbow, say their name, because grief doesn't shrink, but we can grow around it, and we grow faster, stronger, more beautifully when we grow together. Subscribe to My Story Box for more stories about healing, hope, and the courage it takes to let people see you at your worst and still choose to stay. Leave a like if this story reminded you that broken pieces can become something beautiful. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever been the person who showed up for someone? Or has someone shown up for you when you needed it most? Your engagement helps these stories reach people who are sitting alone right now, convinced they have to stay strong, wondering if anyone sees them breaking. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that grief and joy can coexist. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply open the door. Remember, you don't have to be healed to be whole. You just have to be willing to grow, and maybe draw a few rainbows along the way.